as we were saying, right, that God couldn't allow Adam and Eve to go back into the Garden of Eden in their sinful state. The plan of redemption had been laid out for Adam and Eve, and they had known that this is what is going to happen before they could ever come back to Eden. It is going to be tough. So had God allowed Adam and Eve to remain in the garden, right, after they have sinned and continue to have access to the tree of life, he would have thereby perpetuate their sinful lives in their sinful state. What a terrible thing that would have been. Sinners having to live forever, because remember, they would have been partaking of the tree of life. And had he spared them and their descendants from going through hardship and death, they could no more realize the life of sin, what the life of sin is, and they can no more realize it than had the prodigal before going through his licentious lifestyle of hardship and labor and poverty. So you see, sometimes we are going through certain situations and we don't understand why we are going through that situation, but we have to give thanks and everything, because through the situation God see that you can turn out to be a different person, right? But you say, if the Lord could not have brought Adam and Eve into the garden before first passing through death and resurrection, did he have to curse the ground and cause them to earn their bread by the sweat of their brow? Why did he have caused them to eat their bread in sorrow for 6,000 years? Why so long? Because all who have to enter into the kingdom, all who wants to get back into Eden, must first come to the realization, as did the prodigal son came to his realization, that everything away from the garden is nothing more than swine's husk. Work is essential, right? And sinners in general don't like work. They don't like to work. So God had to get man up and busy. So what he did, he got thorns and thistles, and it compelled men to work, because when thorns and thistles come into your garden, it defects, it stagnates the growth and stuff of your produce. So what God did, he allowed thorns and thistles. This way men and women will get up off of their bottom and start working. So when there is no weeds in the garden, everything flourishes. The weeds are there to keep man working, so that man could have little rest and they could work all day. Sometimes, well, when we were small, they say the devil find work for idlers. So it is good to be working. It's a blessing to be able to work. So God's people at that time can no more serve the Lord in Babylon and Egypt than they could have in the days of Ezra and Moses. Because when the plague poured out upon Babylon, just as the fire and brimstone were poured upon Sodom and Gomorrah, then if we, God's people, would be living amongst worldlings when destruction comes to them, obviously we are going to be caught in the midst. So they can no more escape the damage of the plagues than Lot could have survived the fire in Sodom and Gomorrah had he not listened to the angel and leave. So all who wants to escape the ruin of the present day, which is in our day, must come out of Babylon, as Lot and his family came out of Sodom and Gomorrah. So we are going to take a look at two other men in the Bible who have chosen two different paths, which we have lined them out, which is Lot and the other was Abraham. These two men went in partnership after the Lord asked Abraham to leave the land that where he was from, his homeland, and to go to a place where he actually knew nothing about. And where they went, they became rich. They become so rich that they had to separate into two companies. So Adam and Lot, right? One chose to live on the hills, and the one who made that decision of living on the hill where many produce of the crops, it was very difficult at the time, he proved to be the wiser one, which we know was Abraham. And the latter, who is Lot, chose to live in the plains below where the lifestyle looked easy and the pasture looked a little bit more greener. So the latter was Lot and the other was Abraham. So Lot pitched his tent towards Sodom, and the longer he looked at Sodom and Gomorrah, is the closer he drew to them, till he ended up and start living in the city. He became a part of them, right? He became a great man in that city. He became rich, yes. Some people might say perhaps he becomes the mayor, or others might say he just sat at the gate of Sodom, you know. Most likely though, he sat there waiting for strangers to invite them home. Lot family had exciting, riotous living among Sodom and Gomorrah, so much that when it was time to escape, you could imagine that Lot and Abraham, their family and the riches grew so much that they had to part it. And in leaving Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot only escaped with his wife and his 2 daughters, which his wife perished on the way. Which means all that went down to Sodom with Lot perished. They adopted the Sodomese lifestyle and they had riotous living. And we know that the fun did not last, and in a overnight loss, Lot lost everything. He lost all of his possession, and he came out of Sodom and Gomorrah a pauper. He was very poor. He lost everything. So Lot had to pay a price for living among the heathens and adapting their lifestyles. You know, it had to be a price had to pay. And this is what the Lord said to Abraham while after Lot had separated. You will find this in Genesis chapter 13. He said, "Lift up thine eyes and look from the place where thou art northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seeds forever. And I will make thy seeds as the dust of the earth. Then shall thy seed also be numbered. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it, and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee." Then Abram removed his tent and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. So we are seeing now that Lot as well as Abraham appears in the genealogical record of Christ. The question naturally asserts itself is, why should these 2 men be so greatly honored? Why? Let's find out. The answer awaits us. And Abraham obtained this great honor because he was faithful to the word of God and he never questioned it. Whatever God told Abraham to do, he did. Though all these things seems destined, even though what God tell Abraham it don't look possible. It seems like everything was fulfilling themselves contrary to his interest and to God's promises. So though God promised to give the land to him and his posterity for a perpetual possession, Abraham personally never obtained that promise. Besides enduring these fear-trying tests, he waited 25 years for the promised son that God said that he was going to give him, only to be commanded when the young man became a man, when he said yes, he's going to inherit everything. The Lord is saying, "Now, I want you to take your son Isaac and make an altar and burn him, make him the sacrifice." Even through all that, Abraham never lost faith in God. He went directly and did what God tell him to do. He trusted in God and he obeys commands, and for this reason God honored him. And now this is the reason why Lot was blessed. Abraham took the hilly country after Lot chose the most fertile part of the valley, right, which is at Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot family now left the school of God because Abraham was being taught by God. He was in direct communication by God. So Lot left the school of Christ and he entered into the school of man. Abraham, though, and his household remained in the school of God, learning how to make the hills pay good dividends. Abraham became very rich, but Lot became very poor. Abraham, you see, in the school of God, became the world's greatest businessman in his day. He learned to make something out of nothing. Moreover, he was the world's greatest general, for you recall that with but few men he defeated 5 kings. He took the spoil and restored the goods to the rightful owners. All this he did without the loss of a single man. Not one of his soldiers died. And still further, he reared the only son that ever willing to submit to burn on a sacrificial altar for his father's religion. So the great lesson learned here is not so much from Abraham's experience as from Lot. For though Lot was quite so generous as was Abraham, he was not that as generous as Abraham, right? And not quite so willing to live apart from the world as Abraham wanted to. Still, his faith in the promise of Abraham's God was as great as the faith of Abraham. Abraham, yes, in some respect even greater, because Abraham spoke to God directly, but Lot, on the other hand, spoke to God through Abraham. So whatever God told Abraham to do, Abraham will come to Lot and say, this is what. Lot never had direct contact with God, right? He trusted Abraham's word. So as in the days of Abraham, there was no Bible by which to prove that his going forth from his father's house was a fulfillment of prophecy, and that God was leading them, leading him to depart from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land whereabout they didn't even know where they were going. If you read Hebrews 11, you will find that story. We see that Lot was not like most men today, who question and criticize everything in the unfolding of present truth. Without the slightest questioning or doubt, he put his trust in Abraham's God and confidently followed in the quest for the promised land. What a contrast between the character of Lot and that of the Jews who rejected the prophets and even put them to death. For this reason, God honored Lot with the greatest gift heaven could bestow upon a human being, in sharing the earthly parentage of the Lord of glory, the eternal King. That is why it is important that we trust God, and it is important that we be diligent workers and we not be slothful. That's why God tells us in Proverbs 6, go to the ants, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. So here God is sending man to the little ants to be taught by the ants. So this statement from Proverbs is a very humiliating statement. And when you continue to read Proverbs 6, it says, which have no guide, they have no overseer, they have no ruler, they provided her meat in the summer and gathered her food in the harvest. So the ants know exactly what they are to do. They never fail to make a living though they had no boss. They always gather the food. Ants, they're always at work. You never find them lazy doing nothing. It knows when harvest comes and it knows how to make the most of it. So if a man fails to do as the ants, if he fails to take notice of the time and of the season, then his misery shall certainly increase. This is God counseling us. If this counsel came from men, we would have perhaps have no need of it. But it came from God, who has the control of everything. He knows your life. He knows when you were born. He knows you throughout your whole life, even to the point that when you're going to die. He knows. He knows the kind, what you're going through. There is no situation that you're going through that the Lord doesn't know. You may cause yourself to have to go through the way the prodigal son is. A lot of us have to go through the way the prodigal son went, but God don't want us for it. That is why he's asking us to shun this path. So we need to remember that there are only two masters in this world. Two masterminds. It is either the mind of God and that of Satan. We as sinners are born with the mind of Satan, and not until we are born of the Spirit do we have the mind of God and be able to do what is right. Then it is that we must do the opposite of what the natural mind tells us to do, and we shall then be doing what the mind of God is striving to have us do. So the young people know what the adults are doing, and it is very important that the adults set an example for the younger ones to follow. I do hope that those of us who may have been heading in the way of the prodigal son, that we can take an about turn and say, this is not the way God wants. God is counseling of us. I really hope that we can do that. This is the way back to Eden. For everyone that has come into the world, you are born with the mind of Satan, but as you grow in Christ and as you come to love Christ, you develop the mind of Christ as you walk daily, as Enoch walked with Christ for 300 years. We are going to take a look at Esau and Jacob. Another two, one was learned in the school of Christ and one was learned in the school of man. We know that Isaac had twins, and Jacob graduated from the school of God and Esau graduated from the school of man. How do I know this? I know this because if Esau had walked with God, he would not have become a hunter. For God is not a hunter. He's not interested in killing and destroying the lives of his creatures. Thus, rather than taking his training in the school of God, Esau schooled himself in the school of man. He saw no particular value in religion. If you study Esau's life, Esau had no part in religion. He was not interested in it at all. And he placed no greater value on the birthright. Because of all that, he didn't see the value that the birthright had for him, right? Jacob, on the other hand, was anxious to walk with God, and he was very eager to buy Esau's birthright at any price. But he got it at a bargain. Esau, as we all know, sold his birthright for a plate of food. How do I know for certain that Jacob walked with God? I know this because in the end of his first flight, when he ran from the face of Esau, Jacob wrestled with God. And there he saw the angel of God walking up and down a ladder which spans from heaven to earth. And after spending 20 years in the school of God, Jacob left Padanaram and started towards home. With riches untold, God blessed him. Although he had given 14 years of time and labor out of the 20 years, in return for which he received nothing but Laban's 2 daughters' hands in marriage, Jacob, you see, in God's school, learned how to turn poverty into well-paying business. He not only made himself rich, but he made his father-in-law rich also. God blessed his father-in-law because of him. So he learned how to walk and how to save, but he did not stop then. He continued in the school of Christ, and when in Egypt, his son Joseph, who was then second in command to the king, was not ashamed to introduce his father to Pharaoh on the throne. This we see that Jacob was a well-cultured man. Time would fail to permit me to mention everybody else, Joshua and Caleb and everyone else. But in the school of Christ, the students is guaranteed to become the best in whatever line they go, whatever line they undertake. And my advice to you today is that whether you are a grass or whether you are a tree, so to speak, choose the best of its kind. Such you can be if you will do so, for there are no failures in the school of God. You can become the best herdsman or the best king, the best teacher or the best preacher, the best banker or the best whatever you have set your hand to do. it is of interest to note that both the School of God and the School of Man have textbooks. One has the books of men, which need to be renewed every year, and the other has the book of God, in which no one has been able to improve it. The latter is the first and best, which is the Bible, and there has been none like it, and there never will be any like it. The School of God does not only teach from its textbooks, but it does practical as well as theoretical. And the practical many of us don't want to do in terms of dress reform and health reform and